Explain the process and regulatory requirements for reporting an adverse drug reaction during a clinical trial. What role does the Clinical Research Associate (CRA) play in ensuring compliance with pharmacovigilance regulations, and how do these processes align with the GP guidelines? Answer: reporting a DRS is a critical aspect of pharmacovigilance, ensuring the safety of participants during clinical trials. Under ISHGP International Conference on Harmonization, good clinical practice, the sponsor is required to monitor and report a DRS that are related to the investigational product. The CRA plays a key role in ensuring that all 8 DRS are promptly reported to the sponsor and all relevant information is collected and submitted to regulatory authorities. The regulatory framework for 8 DR reporting is outlined in various regulations, including the EU Pharmacovigilance Directive and FDA regulations. A DRS must be reported in a timely manner, typically within 24 hours for serious adverse events, says a detailed report including the severity causality assessment and any potential risk mitigation strategies must be submitted to the relevant regulatory body e.g. FDA and MAP. The CRA should ensure that the clinical site follows the protocol for 8 DR documentation, which includes detailed narratives, lab results, and physician evaluations. Proper documentation and reporting are essential to ensure that the clinical trial remains compliant with safety regulations and GCP standards. Discuss the concept of signal detection in pharmacovigilance. How do signal detection activities relate to the identification of potential safety concerns, and what tools or methodologies can be employed by a CRA to support signal detection and risk assessment during a clinical trial? Answer: signal detection is the process of identifying potential safety concerns in a drug's benefit-risk profile based on gathered data. It is a critical activity in pharmacovigilance, helping to detect any unusual patterns that might indicate an adverse reaction. The CRA plays a key role in supporting signal detection by ensuring that all adverse event data are accurately reported and analyzed. The methodologies for signal detection include disproportionality analysis e.g. reporting odds ratio, Bayesian data mining techniques, and statistical modeling. These tools help to identify any unexpected patterns in adverse event reporting, which could signal a potential safety issue. Risk assessment involves evaluating the identified signals to determine whether they pose a significant risk to patients. The CRA supports this process by ensuring the accurate and consistent collection of adverse event data, facilitating an effective analysis and interpretation of the data. Risk mitigation plans can then be developed based on these findings, including changes to the clinical trial protocol or dosing recommendations. Dr. Matthews is conducting a phase I clinical trial for a new medication. During the trial, several serious adverse reactions, SARS, related to the investigational drug are reported. Based on the emerging safety data, the sponsor decides to implement a risk mitigation plan. As a CRA, what steps would you take to ensure that the risk mitigation plan is properly implemented, and what regulatory requirements must be followed? Answer: Dr. Matthews' scenario requires the CRA to ensure that any identified risks from SARS are properly addressed in the risk mitigation plan. First, the CRA must ensure that all adverse events are thoroughly documented, analyzed, and reported to the sponsor and regulatory authorities in a timely manner. A detailed risk assessment should be conducted to evaluate the severity and frequency of these SARS. To implement the risk mitigation plan, the CRA should review the plan, ensure that the risk mitigation strategies include actions such as adjusting the dosing regimen, enhancing monitoring procedures, or modifying inclusion-exclusion criteria, communicate with the investigators. Ensure the clinical investigators are informed of the changes to the protocol and that they understand any additional precautions or requirements. Ensure regulatory compliance. The CRA must verify that the plan complies with regulatory bodies such as the FDA or EMA, ensuring that updated safety information is reflected in the informed consent documents, clinical trial protocols, and investigator brochures. Monitor implementation. Regularly monitor the trial sites to ensure that the risk mitigation strategies are being followed. Describe the key steps in the study closeout process and the essential components of the clinical study report, CSR. How do the CRO's responsibilities impact the successful completion of these steps, and what regulatory guidelines should be adhered to during this phase? Answer: the study closeout process involves several critical steps, ensuring that all aspects of the trial are concluded in compliance with regulatory requirements. Final data lock and cleaning. Before closing the study, all data must be locked and any inconsistencies or missing data should be addressed. This is crucial for ensuring the integrity of the study results. Final site visit, closeout visit. The CRA conducts a closeout visit to ensure that the site has completed all necessary documentation, collected all study data, and returned any study materials, e.g., drug supplies, final reports, and documentation. The CRA must ensure that the clinical study report (CSR) is prepared, which should include a detailed account of the trial, including study objectives, methodology, results, statistical analysis, and adverse events. The CSR must align with ICHE guidelines. The CRA plays an essential role in ensuring that all documentation is complete, accurate, and compliant with regulations such as those outlined by the FDA or ICH. What are the key pharmacovigilance regulations that govern the reporting of adverse events in clinical trials? How do these regulations help protect patient safety and ensure the ethical conduct of clinical research? Answer: key pharmacovigilance regulations governing the reporting of adverse events include FDA CFR Part 312, governs IND investigational new drug applications and the reporting of serious adverse events, SAEs, during clinical trials. Sponsors must report unexpected serious adverse events to the FDA within 7 calendar days. ICHE pharmacovigilance guidelines provide a framework for collecting, analyzing, and reporting adverse events during clinical trials, ensuring consistent international safety practices. EU Pharmacovigilance Directive provides specific requirements for drug safety monitoring, including requirements for risk management plans and signal detection. These regulations help protect patient safety by ensuring that potential risks related to investigational drugs are promptly identified, assessed, and mitigated. They also ensure that adverse event data are handled consistently and transparently across different regions, contributing to the ethical conduct of clinical trials. What are the essential components of a clinical trial report (CTAR), and how does the CRA contribute to its preparation and accuracy? Discuss the regulatory requirements regarding CTRS and how they align with GCP guidelines. Answer: a clinical trial report (CTAR) is a comprehensive document summarizing all aspects of a clinical trial from design through execution to results. The essential components of a CTR include title and introduction, provides a summary of the study background, objectives, and rationale. Methodology describes the trial design, patient selection criteria, interventions, and statistical methods. Results summarizes participant demographics, clinical outcomes, statistical findings, and adverse events. Discussion and conclusions discusses the results in the context of the study's objectives and compares findings with existing literature. The CRA contributes to CTR preparation by ensuring that all clinical trial data are complete, accurate, and properly documented. The CRA ensures that adverse events, protocol deviations, and other relevant observations are accurately reflected in the final report. Regulatory requirements for CTRS are outlined by CHGCPE, ensuring that the report is complete, accurate, and transparent. What is data locking in the context of a clinical trial, and why is it critical to the integrity of trial results? Describe the CRO's role in ensuring that data is cleaned and locked before the final analysis. Answer: data locking refers to the process of finalizing the clinical trial data after all data entry and cleaning have been completed. Once the data is locked, no further changes can be made and it is ready for analysis. This process is critical because it ensures that the analysis is conducted on finalized, accurate data, preventing any post-analysis manipulation. The CRO's role in data locking includes ensuring data completeness. The CRA must ensure that all data from clinical sites is collected and entered accurately. Data cleaning. The CRA reviews the data to identify and resolve any discrepancies, errors, or inconsistencies. Verification. The CRA ensures that all required documents, including informed consent forms and source data, are in order before the data is locked. The CRA must work closely with data managers and statisticians to ensure that data cleaning processes follow industry best practices and regulatory guidelines. What are the regulatory requirements for archiving study documentation, and how does the CRA ensure compliance with these requirements during and after a clinical trial? Answer: the archiving of study documentation is governed by regulatory bodies such as the FDA, 21 CFR Part 312, EMA, and EP. These regulations require that clinical trial documents, including informed consent forms, case report form (ERFS), and source documents be archived for a specified period, typically 2 years after the last approval of a marketing application or 2 years after the completion of the study. The CRA ensures compliance with these requirements by ensuring proper storage, ensuring that documents are stored securely, preventing unauthorized access or damage, ensuring document retention, verifying that all essential study documents are retained for the required period and are easily retrievable for audit or regulatory review. Archiving ensures the integrity and availability of documentation for future regulatory inspections or legal purposes. Explain the procedures involved in the final site visit, close-up visit for a clinical trial. How does the CRA ensure that all necessary steps are followed and that the site is compliant with regulatory and GCP requirements? Answer: the final site visit is essential to ensure that all aspects of the trial have been completed and that the site is compliant with regulatory and GCP requirements. The key steps include review of study documentation. The CRA ensures that all essential documents, e.g. informed consent form (ERFS) and source documents, are complete and signed. Return of study materials. The CRA ensures that all unused investigational products are returned and that study materials are properly accounted for. Completion of site close-up checklist. The CRA completes a checklist to ensure that all necessary actions, such as data entry, safety reporting, and study-specific documentation, have been completed. The CRA ensures compliance by confirming that all regulatory requirements are met, including the retention of study documents for the required period. Describe the process for obtaining informed consent in a clinical trial, including the regulatory requirements and the CRO's role in ensuring compliance. How does the CRA ensure that informed consent is documented and that participants fully understand the risks and benefits of the trial? Answer: the informed consent process involves providing potential participants with all necessary information about the clinical trial, including the purpose, procedures, potential risks, benefits, and alternatives, allowing them to make an informed decision. Under AEP guidelines, informed consent must be obtained before any trial-related procedures begin. The CRO's role in ensuring compliance with the informed consent process includes reviewing consent forms, ensuring that the consent form includes all required elements as specified in regulatory guidelines, e.g. APFDA 21 CFR Part 50. Monitoring consent procedure, observing that the clinical investigator provides the necessary information to the participant and ensures they have ample time to ask questions, ensuring proper documentation, verifying that signed informed consent forms are appropriately dated and retained in the participant's study file. Ongoing process, ensuring that the informed consent is a continuous process, particularly if new risks are identified or the protocol changes. In these cases, a new consent form must be signed. What are the main ethical principles that guide clinical research, and how do they ensure participant protection? Answer: the primary ethical principles guiding clinical research are derived from the Belmont Report, 1979, which outlines three core principles. Respect for persons. This principle emphasizes the necessity of informed consent, ensuring that participants are fully informed of the nature, risks, and purpose of the study. It also requires respecting the autonomy of participants, especially in the case of vulnerable populations. Beneficence. This principle mandates that researchers maximize potential benefits to participants while minimizing harm. It necessitates the careful design of studies to ensure that the benefits outweigh any risks to the participants. Justice. This ensures that the benefits and burdens of research are distributed fairly. Vulnerable groups should not be exploited, and no group should bear disproportionate risks without access to the potential benefits of the research. These ethical principles are essential to protecting participants and ensuring that the research is conducted with integrity and fairness. Clinical trials must follow ethical guidelines to maintain participant safety, privacy, and informed consent. Describe the role of the informed consent process in clinical research and outline the key elements that must be included in the informed consent document. Answer: the informed consent process is a cornerstone of ethical clinical research and serves to protect participant autonomy. It involves providing potential participants with comprehensive information about the study, allowing them to make an informed decision regarding their participation. The informed consent document must include the following key elements: study purpose, clear description of the research's objectives, study procedures, detailed explanation of what the participant will be required to do, including any treatments or interventions, risks and benefits, an assessment of both the potential risks and the expected benefits of the research, as well as any discomfort that may arise. Confidentiality. Assurance that participant data will be kept confidential and how it will be stored and used. Voluntary participation. Explicit mention that participation is voluntary and the participant may withdraw at any time without penalty. Contact information. Details of the principal investigator or research team to contact in case of questions or emergencies. Approval by ethics committee. confirmation that the study has been reviewed and approved by an institutional review board or ethics committee. What are the primary regulatory frameworks that govern data protection in clinical research, and how do they ensure participant privacy? Answer: data protection in clinical research is governed by several key regulations. General Data Protection Regulation (EDR), a comprehensive EU regulation that ensures individuals' data is processed transparently, lawfully, and for specific purposes. Under GDPR, researchers must obtain explicit consent for data processing, and individuals have the right to withdraw consent at any time. Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act (HIPAA). In the US, HIPAA ensures the confidentiality and security of healthcare data. It applies to researchers handling protected health information (FI) and mandates that data must be de-identified to protect participant identities. 21 CFR Part 11 governs electronic records and electronic signatures in the US, ensuring that data used in clinical trials is accurate, secure, and accessible only to authorized personnel. These frameworks ensure that data is handled securely with proper consent and that participant identities are protected throughout the research process. Researchers must follow strict data management procedures, including encryption and secure storage of sensitive information. Mr. Thompson is conducting a clinical trial that includes elderly participants. What considerations must Mr. Thompson account for when obtaining informed consent from these participants? Answer: when including elderly participants in clinical trials, Mr. Thompson must ensure that the informed consent process addresses several key considerations. Capacity to consent. It's important to assess whether elderly participants have the mental and cognitive ability to understand the study's details. If a participant is unable to provide informed consent due to cognitive impairments, a legally authorized representative may need to provide consent on their behalf. Comprehensibility. The informed consent document must be written in clear, simple language to ensure understanding, particularly if the participants have potential sensory impairments, e.g., poor vision or hearing. Ethical sensitivity. Elderly participants may be more vulnerable to coercion or undue influence. The informed consent process should emphasize voluntary participation with an assurance that there will be no negative consequences if they choose not to participate or withdraw. Risk-benefit assessments. Special attention should be given to the risks associated with participation, particularly since elderly individuals may have age-related comorbidities that could make them more susceptible to adverse effects. The risks should be clearly communicated, and the benefits should be meaningful and tailored to this population. What is the purpose of an institutional review board in clinical research, and what are the essential criteria for IRB approval of a clinical trial? Answer: an institutional review board is an independent committee responsible for ensuring that clinical trials are ethically conducted and that participants' rights and welfare are protected. The IRB reviews the study protocol to assess study design and risks. The IRB ensures the study has a sound scientific basis and that risks are minimized and justified by potential benefits. Informed consent. The IRB examines the informed consent process to ensure that participants are adequately informed and that consent is obtained voluntarily. Vulnerable populations. The IRB assesses whether the study adequately addresses the needs of vulnerable populations, e.g., children, pregnant women, the elderly, confidentiality and data protection. The IRB evaluates the procedures for safeguarding participants' privacy and ensuring that data is securely managed, compliance with regulatory standards. The IRB ensures the study complies with ethical guidelines, including the Belmont Report AEP and applicable national regulations, e.g., FDA and MA. The IRB must approve the study before any participant recruitment begins, and ongoing review is required to ensure compliance throughout the trial. Explain how clinical researchers can manage potential conflicts of interest (COI) to maintain the integrity of a clinical trial. Answer: managing conflicts of interest (COI) is crucial for maintaining the integrity and trustworthiness of clinical research. A COI arises when a researcher's personal, financial, or professional interests might compromise their objectivity. To mitigate COI, researchers should disclosure. Researchers must disclose any financial, personal, or professional conflicts to the sponsor, IRB, and participants. This includes payments, stock ownership, or relationships with entities that may be influenced by the outcome of the trial. Independent oversight. The trial should be subject to independent review by the IRB, Data Safety Monitoring Board, DME, or external auditors to ensure objectivity. Independent monitoring. Regular audits and monitoring by third parties can identify and address any biases or unethical behavior that may arise due to COI training and awareness. Researchers should be trained on recognizing and managing conflicts of interest, including understanding the ethical implications of their actions. The AEP guidelines require that clinical trials be conducted with full transparency and in the best interests of participants, ensuring that COs do not undermine the research's validity. What is the role of case report form ERFS in clinical trials, and why is accurate documentation critical for regulatory compliance? Answer: Case report form RFS are standardized tools used to collect data from clinical trial participants. CRFS serve as the primary documentation of clinical trial data and are critical for data accuracy. CRFS ensure that all participant data is accurately recorded in a consistent format, which is essential for analysis and regulatory submission. Regulatory compliance. Accurate CRF documentation ensures compliance with regulatory agencies like the FDA, EMA, and Health Canada. Inaccurate or incomplete CRFS can lead to non-compliance, audit failures, or even legal consequences. Monitoring and auditing. The CRFS are used by monitors to assess whether the clinical trial is being conducted in accordance with the protocol, regulatory standards, and good clinical practice (GCP), integrity and transparency. CRFS maintain the integrity of the clinical trial by documenting every participant's treatment, responses, and any adverse events or deviations from the protocol. Researchers and sponsors must ensure that CRFS are completed accurately and promptly, with all data double-checked to avoid errors that could compromise the trial's results. Under what circumstances should a protocol amendment be made in a clinical trial, and what are the regulatory requirements for documenting and implementing amendments? Answer: A protocol amendment is made when changes to the original study protocol are required due to unforeseen circumstances involving scientific knowledge or safety concerns. Amendments must be documented, justified, and submitted for approval to the IRB and regulatory authorities before implementation. Common reasons for amendments include changes in study design, altering the inclusion-exclusion criteria, changing the endpoints, or modifying treatment regimens. Adverse events: adjusting the study to mitigate safety concerns identified during the trial. Regulatory requirements: addressing changes in regulations or guidelines that impact the study. Regulatory bodies such as the FDA and EMA require that amendments be clearly documented with a rationale for the changes and details of how they impact the study. What is the purpose of the investigator brochure (IP), and how does it support both clinical researchers and regulatory bodies? Answer: The investigator brochure (IP) is a document that provides essential information about the investigation or product IP, including preclinical and clinical data. Its purpose is to inform investigators of the study drug's safety, efficacy, and potential risks. The IB supports study design. It helps investigators understand the background and rationale for the trial design, ensuring that the study is scientifically grounded. Participant safety. It outlines safety information, including known adverse events, which allows investigators to monitor participants and act promptly if safety concerns arise. Regulatory compliance. EIB is required by regulatory bodies like the FDA and EMA to ensure that clinical trials are based on sound scientific evidence and that researchers are informed of any potential risks associated with the investigation or product. The IB must be updated regularly as new information becomes available, particularly after clinical trials are conducted. What key components must be included in a clinical trial monitoring report, and why is it important for compliance and trial integrity? Answer: A clinical trial monitoring report is a crucial document that provides a detailed account of the monitoring visit, ensuring that the trial is conducted in accordance with the protocol, regulatory requirements, and good clinical practice (GCP). Key components include visit details, information on the date, location, and purpose of the monitoring visit, protocol adherence, assessment of whether the study is being conducted according to the protocol, including inclusion-exclusion criteria, treatment regimens, and data collection procedures, participant safety, documentation of any adverse events or safety concerns with recommendations for further action, data integrity, verification of data accuracy and completeness, ensuring that CRFS are correctly completed and that any discrepancies are addressed, regulatory compliance, confirmation that all regulatory requirements are being met, including informed consent and ethical approval. Monitoring reports are essential for ensuring that clinical trials maintain the highest standards of compliance and participant protection. In a context of clinical trial management, how would you approach resource allocation to ensure that the trial remains within budget while maintaining adherence to GCP standards? What are the key principles and steps involved in budgeting a clinical trial? Answer: effective resource allocation and budgeting are crucial for the successful completion of a clinical trial. The key principles in managing resources while adhering to GCP, good clinical practice standards include detailed planning. The budgeting process begins with a thorough understanding of the trial's design, objectives, and scope. This involves breaking down the project into its constituent parts such as site selection, recruitment, data management, monitoring, and analysis. Forecasting costs. Accurate forecasting of costs includes understanding direct costs, e.g., investigator fees, patient recruitment costs, and indirect costs, e.g., overhead administrative support. An understanding of the total cost of each phase of the trial is essential. Risk mitigation. To stay within budget, anticipating potential risks such as delays or unforeseen costs is essential. Risk management strategies may involve adjusting the budget at certain milestones or having contingency funds available. GCP adherence. All financial decisions must align with the ethical principles of GCP, ensuring transparency and fairness in financial dealings. For example, the sponsor must ensure that payments are fair and adequate compensation is provided to investigators without influencing clinical decision-making. Describe the CAPA process in the context of clinical trials. How does it contribute to maintaining GCP compliance, and what are the steps involved when a deviation or non-compliance issue is identified? Answer: corrective and preventive actions, CAPA, are critical components in maintaining compliance with GCP standards and ensuring that clinical trials are conducted in a safe, efficient, and ethical manner. Corrective actions, these are actions taken to rectify any identified issues or deviations from protocol. For example, if a trial site fails to follow the protocol, corrective actions would involve ensuring that staff are retrained and procedures are implemented to prevent recurrence. Preventive actions, these are strategies designed to prevent potential problems from occurring in the future. For instance, a preventive action could include revising the protocol to prevent a common error observed during the trial or enhancing monitoring procedures. The CAPA process typically follows these steps. Identification of the problem and compliance. The issue is identified either through routine monitoring, auditing, or spontaneous reporting by trial staff or participants. Investigation and root cause analysis. A detailed investigation is conducted to determine the root cause of the deviation or non-compliance. This may involve reviewing records, interviewing staff, and assessing trial procedures. Development of corrective and preventive actions. Based on the root cause, specific corrective and preventive actions are developed. These actions are designed to address the immediate issue and prevent recurrence. Implementation and follow-up. The corrective actions are implemented and follow-up measures are put in place to ensure that the solutions are effective. This could involve additional monitoring or adjustments to processes. CAPA is vital for maintaining the integrity of the clinical trial and ensuring that the trial continues to adhere to GCP and regulatory standards. Failure to properly address deviations could lead to further compliance issues, data integrity concerns, or even trial termination. What are the key considerations when managing relationships with vendors and contract research organizations, CROs, in a clinical trial? How do these relationships impact the quality and integrity of the trial? Answer: managing vendors and CROs in clinical trials requires careful oversight to ensure the quality, integrity, and compliance of the trial. Key considerations include selection and contracting. The initial step is selecting qualified vendors and CROs. The selection process should be thorough, involving evaluations of past performance, expertise, reputation, and compliance history. Contracts should clearly outline deliverables, timelines, payment schedules, and quality expectations. Ongoing monitoring. Effective management requires regular communication and monitoring. This includes tracking milestones, addressing any issues promptly, and ensuring that vendor CROs are meeting contractual and regulatory requirements. It is essential to have clear performance metrics and expectations regarding data quality, timelines, and regulatory adherence. Quality assurance. Vendors and CROs must adhere to GCP and other regulatory standards. This means they must have robust quality management systems, conduct internal audits, and be prepared for external inspections by regulatory bodies. Risk management. It is crucial to assess and manage risks associated with outsourcing to vendors and CROs. This can be achieved by establishing clear contingency plans, regular progress meetings, and performance assessments. These relationships significantly impact the quality and integrity of the trial. Poor management or non-compliance by vendors or CROs can lead to delays, budget overruns, data inconsistencies, or even regulatory violations. Mr. Thompson is the Clinical Research Associate, CRA, assigned to a Phase I clinical trial. During a monitoring visit, he identifies that one of the trial sites has failed to report several adverse events within the required timelines, which is a direct violation of the protocol and GCP guidelines. What should Mr. Thompson do in this situation, and what steps should he take to address the non-compliance? Answer: Mr. Thompson should take the following actions. Immediate documentation. He should immediately document the instances of non-compliance with adverse event reporting. This includes detailing the nature of the violation, the impact on trial integrity, and any potential risks to patient safety. Notify the principal investigator, PI, and site staff. He should inform the principal investigator and the site staff about the deviation. It is essential to communicate the severity of the non-compliance and the requirement to report adverse events within the specified timelines as per the protocol. Investigate the cause. Mr. Thompson should investigate why the adverse events were not reported on time. This could involve reviewing site records, discussing with the site staff, and determining whether the issue is systemic or an isolated case. Implement corrective actions. After identifying the root cause, corrective actions should be implemented. This could involve retraining site staff on adverse event reporting procedures, adjusting monitoring plans, or enhancing reporting mechanisms. Preventive actions. To prevent recurrence, Mr. Thompson should ensure that a more robust reporting process is implemented, including regular reminders to site staff and additional monitoring to ensure adherence to reporting timelines. Report to the sponsor and regulatory authorities. Finally, Mr. Thompson should report the non-compliance to the study sponsor and, if necessary, to the relevant regulatory authorities, e.g., FDA, EMA, especially if the failure to report adverse events has serious implications for patient safety or trial integrity. Non-compliance in adverse event reporting is a serious issue that requires immediate action, clear documentation, and corrective measures to ensure patient safety and GCP adherence. How do you develop a project schedule for a clinical trial, and what are the critical elements that need to be considered to ensure that the timeline is met while adhering to regulatory standards? Answer: developing a project schedule for a clinical trial requires careful planning to ensure that each phase of the trial is completed on time while maintaining compliance with GCP and regulatory standards. The critical elements include trial phases, a clear understanding of the clinical trial phases, e.g., study startup, recruitment, treatment administration, data collection, analysis is essential. Each phase has specific tasks that must be completed within a defined time frame. Task breakdown. Breaking down the trial into smaller, manageable tasks, e.g., site selection, investigator meetings, patient recruitment, helps ensure all critical activities are accounted for in the schedule. Timeline estimation. Estimating realistic timelines for each task based on historical data or expert opinions. This involves determining how long each activity will take and adding buffer time for unexpected delays. Resource allocation. Ensuring that sufficient resources, personnel, budget, equipment are available to complete each task within the scheduled time frame. Contingency planning. Anticipating potential risks and delays, e.g., site recruitment issues, data discrepancies, and creating contingency plans to address them. GCP and regulatory compliance. The schedule must account for all regulatory requirements, such as EBIC approval timelines, drug shipments monitoring, visits, and patient follow-up schedules. By considering these elements, the CI can ensure that the project schedule remains on track while adhering to GCP guidelines and regulatory timelines. What is the role of audits and inspections in clinical trials, and how do they contribute to ensuring GCP compliance? Discuss the key differences between internal and external audits. Answer: audits and inspections are essential components of clinical trial oversight and contribute significantly to ensuring compliance with GCP. They help identify issues, improve trial quality, and ensure patient safety. Audits. Internal audits are conducted by the sponsor or an independent third party to assess trial conduct and compliance with protocol, GCP, and regulatory requirements. These audits typically focus on areas such as data integrity, adverse event reporting, and site practices. Internal audits. These are performed by the sponsor or CRO to review trial processes, monitor staff adherence to standard operating procedures, SOPs, and identify areas for improvement. External audits. Conducted by regulatory authorities, e.g., FDA, EMA. External audits focus on the overall compliance with regulatory guidelines. These audits are often unannounced and examine the entire clinical trial process, including the documentation and data integrity. Both audits and inspections play a crucial role in ensuring trial integrity, identifying deviations, and taking corrective actions when necessary. Explain the core principles of good clinical practice (GCP) and how they ensure the protection of trial subjects and the integrity of the data collected in clinical trials. Answer: GCP is an international ethical and scientific quality standard for designing, conducting, and reporting clinical trials. The core principles include ethical conduct. Trials must be conducted in accordance with the ethical principles laid down in the Declaration of Helsinki. Participants' rights, safety, and well-being must be safeguarded at all times. Informed consent. Participants must be fully informed about the trial's objectives, procedures, risks, and benefits before providing written consent. Data integrity. All trial data must be accurate, complete, and verifiable. Proper documentation of all study activities ensures that the results are credible and reliable. Scientific validity. The design of the trial should be scientifically sound, ensuring that the results will yield valid, useful information. Confidentiality. Participant information must be kept confidential and the integrity of personal data must be protected throughout the trial. These principles ensure that clinical trials are conducted with respect for the participants and the reliability of the data collected. What are the key elements of a risk management strategy in clinical trials, and how do you apply them to minimize potential risks associated with patient safety, data integrity, and trial timelines? Answer: risk management in clinical trials involves identifying, assessing, and mitigating risks throughout the study lifecycle. Key elements include risk identification, identifying potential risks, e.g., patient safety concerns, data discrepancies, delays in recruitment that could impact the trial's progress and results. Risk assessment, evaluating the likelihood and impact of identified risks. This involves prioritizing risks based on their potential to disrupt the trial or harm participants. Risk mitigation, developing strategies to reduce or eliminate risks. For example, implementing additional training, adjusting timelines, or improving monitoring procedures. Contingency planning, preparing for unforeseen risks by having contingency plans in place, such as additional funding for unexpected delays or backup plans for recruitment issues. Continuous monitoring. Ongoing monitoring of risks throughout the trial ensures that new risks are identified early and addressed promptly. These strategies help protect participant safety, ensure the reliability of data, and keep the trial on track. Discuss the responsibilities of clinical investigators, sponsors, and CROs under GCP guidelines. How do these roles contribute to the overall success of a clinical trial? Answer: under GCP, the responsibilities of clinical investigators, sponsors, and CROs are clearly defined to ensure the ethical conduct and scientific integrity of clinical trials. Clinical investigators, responsible for ensuring that the trial is conducted in accordance with the protocol, GCP guidelines, and regulatory requirements. They must ensure participant safety, maintain accurate records, and report adverse events promptly. Sponsors are responsible for initiating, managing, and financing the clinical trial. They ensure that the trial complies with GCP and regulatory requirements and that resources are provided for trial success. Contract research organizations, CROs, assist sponsors in managing various aspects of clinical trials. They help with site management, monitoring, data management, and ensuring compliance with GCP. Each role is crucial to maintaining the ethical and scientific integrity of the trial, ensuring that participant safety is prioritized and that regulatory standards are adhered to. How do you effectively manage trial timelines and track milestones throughout a clinical trial? What tools or strategies would you use to ensure that the trial remains on schedule? Answer: effective timeline management involves defining clear milestones, establishing key milestones such as site initiation, patient recruitment, treatment administration, data collection and analysis. Project management tools, utilizing project management software, e.g., MS Project Asana, to track milestones, monitor progress, and manage tasks. Regular progress updates, holding regular meetings with the trial team to assess progress, discuss potential delays, and implement corrective actions if necessary. Adjustments for delays, having a strategy to address delays such as additional recruitment efforts or shifting timelines based on site performance. These tools and strategies ensure that the clinical trial is completed on time while maintaining compliance with GCP guidelines.